Hear me? Oh, okay. My ears are all plugged. I'm so sick. Sorry if you saw me today and I ignored you. I don't really hear very well, and I'm just a little bit out of it. That's a good thing, like in our weakness, He's made strong. I was singing that. Well, I wasn't really singing. I was pretending I was singing. I was just trying to save my voice, but I didn't want to be a distraction. Like, why? Why is he mad? So I wanted to pretend like I was singing. But it gave me a chance to actually pay attention to the words. I've sung that ocean song like 50 times and have never known what I sang until tonight when I wasn't actually singing it. But that's a good song. Like, I don't know if you ever paid attention to the words. I don't know if you're like me where things fly by you. You don't even notice it. You just kind of go with the flow. But I never knew what we were singing about. And it says, you call me out upon the waters. No, that's not the part I liked. Where was it? Spirit, lead me where my trust is without borders. Spirit, lead me where my trust is without borders. I love that. Because we have limitations to what will let the Spirit do in our lives. Like, God, you do anything with me, but I'm not moving. Or, God, do anything through me, but I've got to be married. God, do anything through me, but I've got to have at least 1 or 2 kids. God, do anything through me once my kids graduate. God, everything has limits. And I just love the words of this song, just saying, wherever you would call me, take me deeper than my feet could ever wander, and my faith will be made stronger. I don't mean to exegete this song, but I just never noticed it. Like, those are beautiful words. It's this trust in saying, God, you know what? Take me somewhere I've never been. Would you just take me to where because let's just admit, we're all scared, right? Don't you want to have some borders and say, God, anywhere within these borders, Spirit, lead me, right? We want to have boundaries for Him. And to just say, God, anything right now, anywhere, anytime, let me say anything to any person. We have limitations. And I'm just praying, well, God, I want this to be true of me. I get it for moments. There's times where it's a fight, where I go, no, you know what, God, right now, okay, anything, anywhere, wherever you want me right now, and then I just start taking it back. Prone to wander, right? And you just don't want to let go, but I don't know, I was just really impacted by that song. But you guys probably already knew that. I have an 18-year-old daughter who's in college, and I have a 2-year-old who's still in diapers. And I got everything in between. And so I've been telling these bedtime stories for 18 years, like stupid stories. And I was just noticing, even today as I was playing with my I don't know how they are, my middle two, I was playing with them, I was thinking, man, I don't treat them the same way I did my older ones. You just get tired, and it's just like, oh, again. And I was just thinking about my 2-year-old, like, man, my bedtime stories are terrible now. They're like repetitive, it's hard to stay excited. So every night it's like, there was a princess, and, her dad saved her from a tiger, and the tiger became a Christian, and they went on an island, and it's the same thing, because every night she wants a tiger, and so it's basically the same story. Whereas I remember my little ones, man, I used to have puppets, I went to Mexico, I bought these Mexican puppets, hola, I'm doing this whole, crazy, I'm acting it out, I'm doing dances for them, everything, singing songs. I mean, it was like a Broadway play every night, for Rachel and Mercy, and then Ellie a little bit, then Zeke, and then for Claire, forget it, I'll tell you the tiger story again, and, they got on an island, they lived happily ever after. Same thing, same type of story, little variety, to keep her a little interested, but it's just like, and I'm just realizing, man, that's terrible. I don't want to be that guy that just kind of gets worse and worse as a dad. And the other night, I was so tired. I'm like, Claire, you tell me a story. And she goes, there was a princess and a tiger, and I'm like, good. I go, what else? She goes, they were on an island with her dad. I go, good, what else? She goes, they all died. It was awesome, But I think about this story. Every night, though, it was getting repetitive. Whereas once upon a time, and they lived happily ever after. And I think about that phrase, happily ever after. Like, what would happily ever after look like to you? Like when you hear that phrase, happily ever after, seriously, in your life, what would that look like? Is happily ever after being 60 years old, still married, playing with grandkids? Your kids love each other, you love them, you love the grandkids. Oh, good, happily ever after. Is happily ever after just meeting that person that you're going to fall in love with and start a life, and you go, man, I don't even care what we do just to have that relationship. That's happily ever after to me. Is it a kid or two? Like, what does happily ever after look like to you? Because I have this thought in my head, like happily ever after to me, I've had this dream, I've had this desire where one day, man, if one day I could actually be with my whole family in heaven, okay, standing before God, and I know they won't be my wife and my kids anymore, but I believe we'll still know each other. In fact, I believe our relationship will even be closer, even though it's not a father, daughter, husband, wife. The Bible is clear that marriage doesn't take place in heaven, but there's going to be some sort of closeness, a new closeness, and I have this dream. To me, happily ever after is one day standing before God. Oh, I want this to happen so badly, where I could look at my kids and look at my wife and then go, I told you this would be worth it. Didn't I tell you guys down on that earth how, man, some of this is going to be hard, it's going to be terrible, but we got to fight through it because I know He's always come through. And He promises me there's going to be something better in the future. And so to me, happily ever after isn't this nice, comfortable life. Honestly, happily ever after for me involves like life being hard. I actually want life to be difficult. I actually want to suffer for the sake of the gospel. I actually want my wife and kids to suffer for the sake of the gospel. And then one day, I'm not saying, man, believe me, I'm not one that likes suffering. But if you ask me what would happily ever after look like, I would love at the end to know that I actually suffered for the sake of the gospel, that I didn't avoid all the persecution, that I didn't go through all of that. And I'd like to know that my kids followed that example and were willing to be ridiculed, willing to be maybe even tortured. And then at the end, finally to look them in the eyes, like, I told you, look, isn't this crazy? This is forever now. I knew it. Every promise He always kept. That's why I kept telling you guys. That's why we made all that money. I didn't give any of it to you, because I knew this would be worth it, because the Bible promised, He said in 2 Corinthians 4:17 that these light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal weight of glory that far outweighs them all. And so, man, if I could have a happily ever after, I would love it. Oh, Lord, I would love it if all 5 of my kids made it, really believed, really were willing to sacrifice anything for the sake of the gospel and even suffered. God, I would love it if I had the boldness and the courage to suffer on this earth and not just dodge persecution, but believe Your promises so much like it's worth it, that I actually suffered while I was on this earth, and that it was difficult, And then we made it to the end, and I told them, and maybe, I don't know, I'd probably die before them, and I could watch them suffer a little bit and go, yes, yes, hold on, baby, go. It's going to be worth it. To me, that's happily ever after. And you've got to decide in your head, what are you chasing after? What's that ultimate dream? And while I say that, and I can say, gosh, I really want this. I really want to suffer. Truth is most days I can't wait for heaven. I mean, I literally cannot wait for heaven. Like, I want heaven now. I don't want to wait and get a reward later. I don't really want to suffer right now. I'd love it if I never suffered and then I still got rewarded because he changed the rules, or something. Like I can't wait for heaven. It's kind of what I mean by that is like, you remember when Moses went up on the mountain and everyone's waiting for him down there? Like, wow. They're seeing like, man, he's meeting with God right now. This is insane. But they're waiting. And pretty soon they couldn't wait any longer. They're like, man, when's he going to come down? They're like, forget it. Let's make a golden calf. Let's celebrate. Let's do something down here. And it's like they created their own. And we read that story and go, that's so stupid. He's got to come down soon. Why don't you just wait? But they wanted to create their own little gathering and their own kind of substitute God rather than waiting for the real thing. And when I read that story, I go, man, that's so me. Like, I don't want to wait for these promises that the Bible talks about. I want to set something up right now where I can enjoy it right now, where I can have my little heaven on earth right now rather than what I read in the Bible. And yet the truth is in my heart, I go, God, would you change my heart? Would you get rid of this cowardly, I hate persecution side of me where I believe in your word so much that I'm willing to suffer for it? Paul talks in 2 Corinthians, before he makes that statement, in 2 Corinthians 4:8, he says, we are afflicted in every way, but not crushed, perplexed, but not driven to despair, persecuted, but not forsaken, struck down, but not destroyed, always carrying in the body the death of Christ, so that the life of Christ may be manifested in our beings. For we who live are always being given over to death for Jesus' sake, so that the life of Jesus may be manifested in our mortal flesh. So death is at work in us, but life in you. You guys, I don't talk about this stuff enough. I'm always the one that's trying, I want to talk about the joy of the Lord. Come on, rejoice in the Lord always. Everything's good. And there is this side. That is true. Yes, I know my future, but there's this other side where Paul says, I'm dying every day. Every day feels like death. He goes, man, I'm crushed, I'm struck down, but I'm not destroyed. I'm perplexed, like I'm confused by this whole world and where everything's going. He goes, but I'm not in despair, like it's not hopeless. And the truth is you guys, sometimes in our churches and in our gatherings, when something goes wrong in life, we're like surprised. Like, why is it so difficult? Why are things so hard? And yet you look at Scripture, and the promise is it's going to be hard. But and then verse 16, so we do not lose heart, though our outer self is wasting away. Our inner self is being renewed day by day, for this light momentary affliction is preparing for us an eternal weight of glory beyond all comparison as we look not to the things that are seen, but to the things that are unseen. For the things that are seen are transient, but the things that are unseen are eternal. See, the key to the Christian life is this outlook of this is going to be over. It's going to be over soon. I mean, you read in 1 Thessalonians 4:18, he says, encourage one another with these words. But what's he talking about? He's talking about the return of Christ. And he says, when life gets difficult, encourage one another with these words. Jesus is going to return. This is all going to be over. We're going to hit the end. That light and momentary trouble, man, it's achieving this eternal weight of glory. Encourage one another with these words. But in the church, I rarely hear that type of encouragement. When's the last time someone encouraged you with the return of Jesus, of the fact that, yeah, life is going to be horrible down here, but we don't encourage you with that. Well, we go, no, it'll get better. You'll get a job. You know, you'll find that perfect person. You know, your husband will come back to you. You know, your kids will follow Jesus sooner or later. You know, your parents may work this thing out. You'll get a better job next time. You know, don't worry. I'm sure money's coming your way. We encourage each other with these fleshly things that are lies. There's no promise of that. You know what? Your child could get more sick. Your mom could get more sick and die. You might not get a better job. You might not get married. You might not ever have a child. Those are not the promises, and those are not the things that God says to encourage one another with. He says, encourage them with the return of Christ. Going, yeah, I know, that was terrible. Man, in ministry, I bring this up because, look, yeah, I can tell you a couple stories of some great things that have happened in discipleship, but I could tell you more stories of just horrible, depressing ones. Of, man, I was discipling this guy for, 2 years, and then he went over, and he ditched this, ditched that. Man, we could sit here and just talk ourselves into depression, right? About all the people you poured your heart into, and then they betray you. They talk behind your back. They start trying to pull people out of your ministry eventually. Man, let's talk about that. It's miserable. And we can't look at that and go, man, that's weird. How come it's not working for me? How come it's not working for me? Well, Paul, look at what Paul's saying. He goes, this is going to happen, this is going to happen, this is going to happen. I feel like I'm dying every day. But you know what? Here's what keeps me going. I know that my light and momentary troubles, it's achieving for me an eternal weight of glory that far outweighs them all. That's why Peter and John are running out after they get beat up and go, yeah, we just suffered for the Lord. This is gonna be good one day. It wasn't about the here and now. How do you encourage people? My wife gave the greatest example. We were talking at a marriage retreat, and she starts sharing. She goes, you guys ever watched the show The Amazing Race? You guys ever seen that? The Amazing Race. If those who haven't seen it, it's this reality show, I guess you call it a game show type of thing, where you pair up with someone and you just race these other couples all around the world. Sometimes it's a father-daughter, sometimes it's two buddies, or sometimes a married couple. And it's kind of interesting. You're racing to get to this destination. You get clues, and you try to get there, and the last one there or something gets disqualified at every checkpoint. I don't know how it works. I only saw it a couple times. Is that how it works? Is that last place at each checkpoint is disqualified? No? Not always? Most of the time, see? So that's how it works. Okay, so you get the idea, though. You're running. And, but she goes, being married to Francis, she goes, it feels like we're on the Amazing Race. That's what life feels like. Like, we may have a great season and get to a checkpoint. She goes, but we don't have time to celebrate. It's a quick high five, and then let's just keep running. And she goes, and we don't have time to fight. Because if you've seen the show, you see the couples, how they start fighting and they lose. They fall behind because they're arguing, and it just disrupts everything. She goes, man, we don't have time to fight. We don't have that much time to celebrate. High five. She goes, when we cross the finish line, when this thing's all over, she goes, we'll be celebrating forever together. But right now, it's a race. Right now, we're pursuing something. And I'm listening to this example. I'm going, man, that's so awesome. Because so many couples don't think of life that way. And as we, run this race together, and as we figure out in our minds, how do we make the most disciples? How do we have the biggest influence on the kingdom while we're here on this earth? As we figure that out, it's amazing how close we get. Like my wife and I, we don't sit down and go, man, how can I love you better? I'm not saying that's bad. I'm just saying we are so tight. Man, I am crazy about my wife. We just celebrated 20 years, and I swear I just love her so much more, and she's so beautiful to me, and we're just tracking right now, and I love it. I love my family, and yeah, you know what? Sometimes I'm not the best dad or best husband, but there's this tightness because we're focused on the mission. And we're not focused on the family. We don't sit around and stare at each other and figure out how to please one another. We're both looking at God, and we're running this race. We're pursuing this mission, and it's awesome. We've grown closer and closer, and it really is that amazing race. Do you think of life that way, where, man, this is a journey, and we'll celebrate at the end. But right now, we're going to struggle through this thing, and we don't have time to slow down. We're going to win this thing. We're going to win this race. And as she was sharing that, I thought, man, that's such a great picture of our lives right now. I just want to keep running. I want to keep running. I feel like most Christians are playing Survivor. We're just trying to live. I don't want to die, rather than really pursuing something. And I know some of you guys are married. Some of you are pursuing that. I'm just saying, we do things so backwards in the American church sometimes, where we do amazing things when we're young. And then the older we get, we just slow down more and more and more and play it safer and safer and safer. And we'll sing songs like Oceans. It's like, yeah, and maybe I'll raise my hands now and sing it, but do you really live this out? Or is like, God, take me somewhere crazy. Take me somewhere crazy. I know we just had a baby, but that's all right. That's all right. Whatever. It's because I'm further along in my faith. In fact, I was talking to a marathon runner. I've never run a marathon. I never came close. Don't even want to. It's just a long way. And so a marathon runner, so correct me if I'm wrong, but she was telling me how, actually the goal is to run the second half of the marathon faster than the first half. Like that's what we have in our mind. I go, really? So like you're almost like somewhat pacing yourself, but you go a little faster. And then by the end, when you actually see the finish line, then isn't that the beautiful picture? When that marathon runner sees that line and you think they have nothing left, but then they just start sprinting for that finish line and the crowd starts screaming. And I'm thinking about that. I'm going, man, that's the way the Christian life is supposed to be. It's not, I did these radical things when I was 18, 22, 25, and then I got married, and we still went on a mission trip or something and helped out with Sunday school, and then we had a kid, and we really had to slow down, because you really have to pay attention to your children in those early years, and then when they become teens, it's like, wow, we better not do anything except focus on them and focus on our family, and then, and then once with, it's just on and on and on until pretty soon it's like, man, you do nothing by faith anymore. And I get it. I mean, I understand the tendency. I understand why. I mean, when you're 18, you figure, what have I got to lose? Right? I got no job. I got no life. I don't have anyone depending on me. It's just me. If I die, I die. Big deal. Woo, And then you get married and go, well, it's not just me anymore. Now the stakes are higher. I'm taking care of a wife. Now I have a kid. Okay, well, we can't just go crazy and live by faith anymore. Now we've got to be more responsible. And you get in this mode where you do less and less that requires faith and more that's just about safety and security until you just go, well, one day when the kids graduate and once they're married off, once I have them married off and I know that they're set, yeah, great. And how old are you going to be at that point? And after all these years of doing nothing by faith, you think that now suddenly you're going to do something insane? Man, I'm just saying, you know what? I want to live this life like a race. And for me, I'm 46. I turned 47 this summer, and I think about the end more than ever. My parents didn't live to this age, so I go, man, I'm outliving my dad, outliving my mom. They didn't make it to this age. And so this is crazy. I'm on borrowed time right now. I even think in my mind, I this last year I thought to myself, I just think about the number 60. I go, okay, age 60. Let's just say I make it to 60. I'm thinking this way, and I just picked that number because I have a lot of friends who died way before 60, and I have friends that are over 60. But I go, man, that's a good number to shoot for, and just go, okay, let me just play the odds, and I would place it at 60. That at age 60, I'll still be able to think and talk, and no, I mean, I have people that are losing it before that. I mean, nowadays it's just whatever. And so I look at that number, and so I start thinking to myself, I go, okay, if I'm going to make it to 60, that means I've got about a little over 13 years left to go. And then I start looking at everything in my life. I go, if I've got 13 years of life left, then is it okay for me to come this weekend to this conference? Let me start thinking through my life and what I'm doing. People want me to make these commitments for 6 months, a year. And I'm going, okay, if I've got 13 on this earth and then I'm going to stand before God, what am I going to do with that time? I don't know if I can afford a whole weekend and a discipleship weekend. Okay, there better be something that happens from this. There better be something that matters, because I don't know. I don't get it how people, the older they get, the less radical they get. And I'm going, man, that's backwards. We're getting closer and closer to seeing this holy, holy, holy God forever and ever. Man, that's the way my mind thinks. Man, sometimes even when I'm preaching now, I'll look at the clock. A lot of places will have a countdown clock to make sure I stay on time. And I just think, man, if that's my life, if my life's going to end in 22, in 13 seconds, what would I say? What would I do? How am I going to just really get to these people and say something that's going to matter? Will I care what any of them think in 22 minutes? Man, if that's when I'm going to stand before God, I start thinking that way. I start looking at my possessions. Go, okay, if 60 is that number, how can I get rid of everything I own? How can I start just making sure I'm investing and storing up for eternity? Man, I haven't really suffered that much. I avoid persecution a lot of times. Man, I don't want to do that. I don't want to end my life as a coward. Man, I want to sprint for that finish line. I read about Caleb in the Old Testament and how that man just, he goes, I don't care, I'm 85. I'll storm that hill. I could fight. I can still fight. If God's with me, I'll take him down. Man, I was the only one that believed when I was 40. So what's the difference now? I'm still dependent on that God. I go, man, I want to be that, because I want to be a different example. I know a lot of you young people, you do crazy things, and then you see once people get married, you settle in, slow down, don't do things by faith. And I'm going, no, I want to go like that song says. I want to go, whatever, it's like in the water or something. Like where I want to take another step. I think of that picture of, like if this black thing over here was the boat, like Peter stepping out on the water, right? Isn't that what the song's about? Call me out upon the water, but what you do, like Peter gets, scared, he sinks, he gets back in the boat. This is what I feel like so many people do. It's like we'll take a step of faith and we'll jump back in the boat and write a book about it. Go, man, I did something crazy back when I was 20, and you just talk about the rest of your life sitting on the boat and telling the youngsters when I was your age, and I'm going, man, could it be possible? What if I never get back in the boat? Like, can I take another step away, when I'm 25, and then when I'm 26, and then when I'm 30, when I'm 40, like where I just take bigger steps of faith every year to the point where when I'm 60, I don't even know where the boat is anymore. Like there's no going back. Like I'm so far out there that if there's no God, I am the biggest idiot on earth. Like God, I am counting on the fact now I am sprinting towards this finish line, and I hope I can just collapse into your arms. man, I'm just hoping I cross that line and you're there and you're going to catch me. This is everything I'm living for. I'm dreaming of this, that all the suffering and all the fighting and taking one more step, not giving up, I want to cross that finish line and just collapse in your arms and go, yes, it's over. I ran the race. I fought the good fight. I ended well. Man, that's my dream. Man, is that what you're pursuing? Is this life like the amazing race for you? Those of you who are married, are you guys competing together as a team, just going, man, good job, honey. Now let's go. Let's keep going. That was awesome. We're not going to sit here and celebrate and camp out. The race is still going. We got to finish this thing. And some of you, I can tell, are close to the finish line, and that's awesome. And what I'm saying is, man, I meet very few people like that whose lives make sense. Because I go, why aren't you sprinting? Why are you still buying stuff? Like, you don't have that much longer. Like, honestly, this isn't a bad thing. Like, that's a wonderful thing. I've enjoyed getting older. I don't want to stay young. I want this thing to end. Man, I'm getting tired. I don't want to tell another bedtime story. Like, just end this thing. Let's go hard and finish this up. But do you see it that way? Is it an amazing race to you? And I don't mean to make it sound like everything's horrible, because like what Jesus says, there's like these two truths. One, yeah, it's horrible. It's suffering. It's dying every day. And maybe no one ever told you that. So then when things get difficult, you just want to ditch it all and go, that didn't work for me. I mean, I heard one guy, someone was telling me that they were talking to someone who read Crazy Love. He lived in Atlanta, and it's always weird over there. But, they said, yeah, I did the Francis Chan thing, Like, what's the Francis Chan thing, first of all? Yeah, where I would sell stuff. It didn't work for me. I'm like, what didn't work? What, you did something radical and you didn't get an earthly reward? Is that what you were thinking? Like, well, yeah, I sold this and I never got rich. Where'd you get that? Like, what do you mean it didn't work? It's about the end. There is this suffering. But there's this other truth, too. That in our suffering, there's a life to it, isn't there? Haven't there been times where you suffer and you go, gosh, this is actually good. I actually want to know the fellowship of his sufferings. That's what Jesus was saying is this life of trying to save everything, you're going to lose it. But when you lose it and you're willing to die for me, man, that's when you're going to find life. That's what Paul was telling Timothy. He goes, man, instruct the rich. That's all of us. He goes, instruct the rich to be rich in good deeds. Why? He says, so that they may take hold of the life that's truly life. There's a true life in this sacrifice. Jesus, at the cross, there's a life to that. If I am giving my life to this world, there's something beautiful about it. It's scary, it's difficult, but there's life. Man, we celebrate 20 years in January, and so we're like, man, where do you want to go? Where do you want to go? And my wife's like, let's go somewhere significant. I go, yeah, you look back at life, all the great times. We're not, we had a good time on a vacation here or whatever, but let's do something that means something. And we ended up going, yeah, let's go to Ethiopia. It's a good 20-year anniversary trip. Let's go to Ethiopia. And I go, in fact, I got this friend of mine. I'd like him to come with us, if that's cool. Because he goes to like the poorest of the poor. Like he finds out places that no one goes. World Vision, UNICEF, Feed the Hungry. None of them go to these places. And let's go with him. And he's not a pastor. He's not a missionary. He runs a marketing firm. Just what he does on the free time. We went with him, and not only did we go feed these people that, this one lady, we're looking at their daughter who's just whittling away to nothing, and her other 4 kids have already died of starvation, and, it's like that type of sickly, it just, the things I'd always seen in pictures but never touched and held and hugged, and feeding these kids. And then we went to the red light district, which was just disgusting. I mean, this was the closest I've been to hell. It's just disgusting, just streams of like urine and thousands of women in these little tiny huts that are just barely big enough for a bed, okay? And they're paying rent, like $3 a night. So they have to sleep with at least 5 guys a night for $1 each to pay their rent and take care of their kids. And once they get behind, man, then they're just indebted to these guys. So they're basically these slaves in these rooms, and you just see guys walking from one into the next, and these women, while their clients come in, they just put their kids under the bed. There's kids running around everywhere. I mean, it's just, I've never seen anything like it. It was just chaos. It was just disgusting. And we're just inviting these women like, man, tomorrow we just want to have a feast for you. We just want to celebrate with you. We just want to treat you like a woman for one day. We'll give you a meal, send you away with a little something. The next day, like 700 of these women show up. And we feed them all. And my buddy Sean shares his testimony. They're going nuts. We brought some ladies up that came out of there, that we got them into these educational programs where they learned how to sew, they learned how to do hair, they learned how to do something to get them out of this world, and they gave their lives to Jesus, and they're up sharing testimony in front of hundreds of these women. All of this is going on, and I'm thinking about this ministry that this guy does, and the coolest thing is I've seen pictures of my buddy, his name's Pat, I've seen pictures of him where some of these women that he rescued out of that life, I've seen pictures of him walking them down the aisle on their wedding day. And, he's this little white guy, old guy, just, walking these women up the aisle. I saw like 5 different pictures of him with different women walking him up the aisle. And immediately, I just got so jealous. I just thought, that is the coolest thing you could do on earth. I mean, men, think about this. What would top that? You help a woman out of that lifestyle, that type of hell, where every night 6 o'clock comes and you're going, who's going to come to my door? Am I even going to get to my quota of 5 guys? What are they going to do to me? The misery, the pain, the things that have happened to these women as they hear the stories. That you take a woman like that, have her fall in love with Jesus Christ, you help her learn a trade so she can do something else. Some of them have become nurses now, some of them have become teachers now, and then one of these women looks at you and says, hey, you're the one that helped me out of that, you're the one that introduced me to Jesus, and now I met this man and he wants to marry me and treat me like a woman. But you were like a dad to me. Is there any way you would fly out here and just walk me up the aisle? Man, and can you imagine the honor of walking next to this woman knowing what you took her from, and now you're walking her up the aisle and you're handing her over to a man that's going to take care of her and treat her like she should be treated in the name of Jesus, and you're going to be with her for all of eternity. That's the stuff that makes a Ferrari look boring. That's the stuff that makes all that, you know what I mean? So yeah, I am talking about sacrifice. I am talking about suffering. I am saying we're going to have trouble in this world, but there's also life in it. Man, if you really are going to live this life of making disciples, wherever, anywhere on the earth, if you really are going to sing these songs, not just sing them, but live it out and go, God, no matter what happens, because look, my encouragement to you is not even that there's going to be a happy ending like that you'll get to walk this girl up the aisle. You may be rejected by everyone you try to help, but you take heart because Jesus says, I've overcome this world. There's going to be another life. There's going to be a happily ever after. The question is what happily ever after are you chasing? Like something on this earth? Or are you letting go of that and say, God, take me on an adventure. I want to experience that life that's truly life. And that comes from sacrifice. That comes from suffering. That comes from those few times you're able to actually help someone out of their situation, introduce them to Jesus, and know that you're going to spend all eternity with them. And so I didn't want to give any false hope tonight that I promise you, you follow this pattern of discipleship and the things you learn all day long, and you're going to have this thriving ministry. No, you might not. This might be a terrible year for you. Good news is you'll die soon. Like, this is all going to be over. And, let's just take one more step. Let's just try to run a little faster. I know, let's pick up the pace a little bit. Finish line's coming, and we're all going to collapse into his arms. And everything we sacrifice, whatever little trial we went through, it's going to be worth it. That was his encouragement. And encourage one another with these words. I mean, maybe even in your groups today, one, talk about, think about the suffering you avoid. It's not like we're like, I'm not talking about asceticism where you just go out and try to suffer. But I'm not talking about it. I just think there are things we avoid. And so we just make it like, oh, there's no persecution in our country. Well, yeah, not if you don't say anything about your faith, But if we know we dodge some of this. So let's be honest with that. The areas we're struggling in our faith, that Christ is really going to come through for us. Some of maybe we're not willing to let go of the standard of living we always hope for when we're in our 60s and 70s. And I go, man, I wanted to be comfortable there. I know God's always going to meet my needs if I seek the kingdom first, but that's not enough for me. I don't want just daily bread. I want shuffleboard. I want these things. And just be honest. Look, this is what I want. And go, man, I'm scared to let go. I'm scared to believe that God really has something better for me. And let's just admit some of those fears that we have, whether it's for family, for our kids. I sure hope I don't make this sound like it's no big deal to me, because, man, I'm crazy about my children. And every time they suffer, man, as a dad, I just want to take every ounce of pain away from them. But understanding Scripture has caused me to pray for them in a new way. And there are times now when I pray for my kids, I go, God, please have them go through some suffering. Have them go through some hard times when they're still at home with me. Because Scripture says that the trials are what's going to make them stronger. So God, would you have them suffer a little bit? Or as much as you need them to? I need them to be strong, because I think the world's going to get more and more difficult to hold on to their faith. And I got to know that they're strong. So don't make their life too easy, please. Have them suffer through and learn how to depend on you. Help them to seek the kingdom first. Man, I understand it's difficult, but let's share those fears that we have. And then, as people share those things, let's encourage them the right way, Let's encourage one another with heaven. Let's encourage one another with the return of Christ that is so lacking in the church today. And the reason is because we're trying to set up our own heaven on earth. Let's wait for heaven. Let's be willing to wait. Let's not be like the Israelites and just make our own golden calf and our own heaven on earth, our own isolated little protected. No, let's wait for heaven. And let's run this race for now. Okay? Let's celebrate. Quick high five. Let's keep running. No time to fight with each other. Let's get over our differences. And let's keep running the race. So I'm going to have Paul come up and actually sing a song that lead us in a time of worship where we're just saying to God, God, it's okay. Sorry for the times I've gotten angry through the difficult times, but I get it now. This isn't about this life. I'm going to get through it. I'm going to get through it. Let's encourage each other with eternity. Let's wait for heaven. Let's finish this race. Let's wait for the right happily ever after.